Have any of the 42 illegal migrants on the terrorist watch list or no-fly list encountered on our southwest border been released into the United States?
Ranking Member Jordan, as I mentioned before, I will provide that data to you with respect to the disposition of each one. I do not know the answer to your question.
The Secretary of Homeland Security does not know the answer to the status of 42 individuals who came to our southern border illegally, are on the no-fly list and the terrorist watch list. You do not know whether they have been released or not into the country. That's your testimony.
Ranking Member Jordan, as I've said before, I will provide you the data.
That was a stunning exchange, rather telling. Jim Jordan from Ohio grilling the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, unable to give the basic information during a House hearing. Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House. How you doing, sir? Good morning to you. He either did not know or did not want to answer. What would be your answer on that?
Well, look, this administration has followed a policy of secrecy and dishonesty on the border. They don't tell us where they're sending what is now over 1 million people. They fly them in late at night. They put them on trains and buses. And they literally refuse to tell people where they're going. They're talking seriously about dropping the public health requirements, which would mean 19,000 illegal immigrants a day is the current estimate. That's the city of Atlanta every month, 12 Atlantas a year in illegal immigrants. Mayorkas is a combination of incompetent and implementing the policies of Joe Biden. I mean, Biden has decided that he wants an open border, but he can't say it, that he's willing to accept anybody, whether they're diseased, whether they're carrying fentanyl, whether they have a criminal record. They're just not paying any attention. And the Border Patrol is now so drowning in the sheer number of people, they can't compete with the cartels. So what you've seen is the cartels gradually taking control of the American southern border, the flood of fentanyl alone, and I was just in Cobb County, Georgia, where 6 people had died in the previous 2 weeks from fentanyl. And this is madness. I mean, at a minimum, Kevin McCarthy's right. Mayorkas ought to be impeached. But I think also the whole department has to be overhauled. And the idea that they're not going to appoint some left-wing zealot to become the censorship czar for the United States, clearly unconstitutional, clearly a violation of the First Amendment, and maybe a tribute to Joe Biden's friends in the Chinese Communist Party or Moscow, but certainly very un-American. And I think this just tells you how out of control they are.
We have the statistics here about the migrant encounters so far this year. The numbers are staggering, and they are out there for everyone to see. But earlier today, as we were reporting on this new Quinnipiac poll, Bill pointed out that if you look at the breakdown of Republicans and Democrats, Republicans think of immigration as their #2 concern after inflation and the economy. But for Democrats, it's way down the list, like number 5 or 6 or so. Why do you think that is? What do you make of that?
Well, I think historically Republicans have been much more committed to American patriotism, to the idea of the nation. I think on the left you have a large block of people who don't want to stand for the national anthem. They don't want to recognize the American flag as our primary symbol. They don't want to teach American history accurately. And they frankly think it's just fine to be drowned in people who don't understand America, haven't learned about our country, haven't assimilated. So I think there's a huge difference there. But interestingly, among Latinos who used to be Democrat, the flood of illegal immigrants is actually driving them into the Republican Party and is, I think, profoundly changing the politics of the United States.
Tom McClintock's a Republican from California. He was doing a lot of the questioning. Just last point on this. He told us that there will be no progress on the border as long as the current administration's in power. Now, he might be right, or in a month from now, if you see 18,000 people a day cross the border, that may have an impact, the visual that many will see. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, the Republicans are going to win the House and the Senate. I think one of the first things they should do is send up a bill requiring the completion of the wall, requiring control of the border. It'll be wildly popular with the country. It'll have 70% plus support. And put it to Biden and put it to the House and Senate Democrats. You want to vote against controlling the border. You want to vote to continue to allow millions of illegal immigrants to come in. And remember, This is all going to keep growing. The fact is, when you have the governor of California promising free health care to anybody who's illegal who comes into the U.S., we're sending a signal. There are 150 countries now that have sent illegal immigrants to the United States in the last 2 years. 150 countries. So this is just going to get steadily worse. And I think it could be in January one of the first really big fights between the new Republican Congress and the president. And I think he's going to have a hard time sustaining a veto.
Interesting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good
Nice
to
to
see
see
you.
you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
It was a very